asked to cooperate with the intelligence in order to pass information about Al Jazeera. He was asked about links between Al Jazeera and Al Qaeda and many other issues like that. Repeatedly, over 6.5 years, he was put under this kind of pressure. And he spoke that, Al Jazeera hosted Sami many times on the screen, and he told his story. Unfortunately, the story of Sami al-Hajj until now is not settled. This man spent 6.5 years, then he was released. There is no apology for him. There is no investigation why he was arrested, why he was taken from Afghanistan. A cameraman working for Al Jazeera. And we have informed the American army at that time about all our operations in Afghanistan and in Iraq. But both were bombed in Afghanistan and Iraq. So we have a lot of doubts about what has happened. And until now, the issue of Sami, the issue of Tariq Ayyub who was killed in Baghdad, and the issue of bombing of our bureaus and so on and so forth can never be put to rest unless we receive either proper investigation on how and who did this, and then an apology about what has been done.
Have you spoken to the Obama administration about this?
We did.
Did you speak to the Bush administration?
No, during the Bush administration, as I said, we were lucky that we were not bombed in Doha, But again, we used to raise it always. We used to speak about it whenever there is an official visiting Al Jazeera or publicly. We always used to demand this kind of apology or this kind of investigation.
Has President Obama appeared on Al Jazeera for an interview?
Not yet.
What has he said? Have you requested?
We have put a request, and we have been told that it is on the table. But when appropriate time comes, he will appear.
What was the effect of his speech in Cairo?
Fantastic. The effect of his speech was magnificent. Everyone was, I think, our audience and the Arab world was very happy to hear what he has heard there in Cairo. Now, maybe later on, when events start to unfold, people start feeling that there is no maybe delivery. Maybe there are many other issues that should be addressed. The region is still going through huge turmoil. The issue between the Palestinians and the Israelis and the peace process has not been resumed. There are many difficulties. But the speech per se, that night, when he delivered that speech, it was received very well in the Arab world.
BBC tried to launch an Arabic network before Al Jazeera began, isn't that right?
In 1995, and they had to close down after a few months.
In fact, many people went over to Al Jazeera, is that right, when you began?
Most of our journalists and editors and technical crews, actually, came from BBC.
So why do you think they couldn't do it and you could?
Frankly speaking, the BBC at that time had to depend on governments as well in the Arab world, financially, and to depend on them on distribution. Al Jazeera broke away from that, and Al Jazeera had independent distribution through satellite, and at the same time did not depend on political alliance with any government, and that is important. Yes, you may argue that Qatar is, yes, true, but Qatar, again, is a small country in the region, and Qatar does not have, that ambition of controlling Al Jazeera in order to be their voice. Had they done so, we would have lost, as I said, But this is why we succeeded. We succeeded because we maintained our independence. Whoever got upset and angry from us, that didn't reflect on our screen.
How do you compare to CNN, to Fox?
We report from within. We respect the margin more than the center, frankly speaking. We are not a TV station that only concentrate on those who always under light. We are not a TV station for celebrities and for grand politicians and superstars. We are a TV station of the ordinary person. So normal people, ordinary people in the Arab world sees Al Jazeera as their voice. They look at Al Jazeera as their own. They own Al Jazeera. When there is something wrong on Al Jazeera, I feel that the audience would like to crash us because they feel that's on, as if we are on their behalf running this TV station. So that is important. Of course, it is heavy responsibility. And for me, as a director general, sometimes I feel annoyed by when I'm walking in the airport or traveling or going to a restaurant, everyone's coming, giving me lectures and advices about what should be done and how should we do it. But I love it because it means that the people think that Al Jazeera is theirs. So we are centered around the people, the human being, not about centers of power.
How do you compare to other Arab media and Arabic language media?
Number one, of course, Al Jazeera now is above 57% rating in the Arab world as far as the news are concerned. We have other channels who have come up with similar style, sometimes with Al Jazeera, but I always argue that political relationship between governments and TV stations do ruin credibility of TV stations. So this is, I think, more and more independent voices should appear in the region.
How are you going to make Al Jazeera English in the United States happen?
Approach number one is try to get people to watch Al Jazeera English all over the country. Second, we would like to make our operation in Washington much more around the country. So we would like to have bureaus in many other states where we could be in touch not only with Washington but with people in the states and reflect that in our broadcasting in Arabic and English. And we would like as well to listen to the people. What do they demand from Al Jazeera? Because our news is it's established now for 13 years. We have certain kind of code of ethics and conduct. We have a spirit of Al Jazeera. We have theory of reporting news. It has succeeded in the Arab world. And whoever I met in Washington, he loves Al Jazeera. From politicians to think tanks to ordinary people, people love Al Jazeera. And they love Al Jazeera because we have news. We have news there. And we do not take side. I was watching some of the talk shows during the last few days here, some of the news channels. And I didn't like the idea that as far as the news is concerned, people are only taking one side of the story. We do not do that. We do have the opinion and the other opinion. I think people would like to see a TV station that reports news as it is and enable them to have knowledge and then to decide for themselves what kind of philosophy or idea or ideology or party or whatever they want to support.
What got you, Wada Khanfar, into the position you are today? What is your background? Why were you interested? How did you come to Al Jazeera? I
started actually from an academic background. I was doing my master's degree, postgraduate studies in South Africa, about Africa. I started as an engineer. I migrated to philosophy and international politics, and I did my studies about Africa, democracy and democratization in Africa, taking Kenya as a model. And then while I was doing so in 1996 in South Africa, Al Jazeera was established. So they requested me to be an analyst on African affairs. And the first few interviews and calls were about Africa, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, whatever the case at that time. Then slowly they said, why don't you start reporting for us? And they started reporting for Al Jazeera from Africa, from about 30 countries, whenever there is a crisis, up to 2001. In 2001, I went to Afghanistan to cover the war. Where
were you born, Wada Khanfar?
I was born in Jenin, Palestine, West Bank.
And did you grow up there?
I did, actually. After I finished my matric degree in Palestine, I left to Jordan to study engineering in the University of Jordan.
And what do you think of the latest developments in the conflict there? So you are here in the United States and in Washington when the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting with President Obama in Washington.
It is becoming much more complicated than before. I think the scene at this moment in time is fragmented. There is no proper prospect for dialogue. Even when we speak about peace process, it seems to me that the process has become the target, not the peace. Everyone is interested to put people together. The idea is we need peace in the region, not only process. The process is not the target. The target is peace. And in order to do so, there is a great American role to be played there. And there is very clear message that should go to the parties in the region, telling them this is what should happen. The idea of proximity negotiations will not lead us anywhere. Everyone has his own calculations, and it seems to me that everyone is not interested in going ahead with this issue of peace. Everyone is interested to show off that he is sitting and talking and taking pictures in front of the cameras. That is not going to lead us anywhere. That will increase, actually, the problem. Every year, we go to a much worse situation than before. And someone has to come and say, look, I'm going to quit from this madness. This is the proposal, and this is how we're going to arrange it. And to push, really, and to lead the international community in order to implement that.
Do you see the U.S. doing that?
They have to do it. It is the mother of all problems in the region. This is why the Americans have been suffering in their relationship with the Arab world. This is why there is a lot of anger and frustration in the Arab street. The issue of Palestinian-Israeli conflict is the center of all conflicts. It's not Iraq and it is not Afghanistan. Unless this issue is resolved, there will be very difficult relationship between the Arabs and Muslims on one hand and the Americans on the other hand.
Well, Khan Khar, the Director General of Al Jazeera. If you'd like a copy of today's show, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. We'll be back in a minute.